So, I posted almost a month ago about one experience with my mother and how I got petty revenge on her as a kid. I was initially going to post this story, but I didn't want to seem like a super terrible person. But after the response to the last post, I'll post the whole story, which is still somewhat ongoing. So I apologize, the backstory is pretty long, but it's necessary to understand why I did what I did. Thanks for your thoughts. For those that have been kindly pressuring me via private message, I made GoFundMe warning it's NSFO. I don't expect much, but I'll be using anything I gain towards securing a place to live. As far as my art page, feel free to ask in the comments. TLDR. My mother abuses me badly for most of my life, as well as my younger siblings. I have to drop out of college and support myself after she drove me to homelessness. She proceeds to laugh at me about me being homeless and Denny's abuse. So I ruined her life by getting my younger siblings removed and her arrested, making her lose her job, reported her to the IRS, and essentially set her up so that the remainder of her life is full of disaster and hardships. VACKSTR. My mother was a really shitty person. I have 4 other siblings, 1 older sister, 3 way younger, 3 different dads. Before I was born, I'm a male too. My oldest sister was taken away from my mother when she was a few months old because she tried to slice the father of my sister while he was holding her. She lost custody and the dude left her. Older sister goes to live with her father's family in a different city. CUE LILOL me coming into this CXY world. My dad went to jail 2 to 3 years after I was born for a while. I rarely saw him. He's an alcoholic, if that matters. She was a single mother, but she made it work, and she worked hard. One of the bigger problems was that she took out all her aggression and hatred of my father on me, as well as work stress, and etc. She dealt with sexual abuse growing up, which I'm sure definitely affected her relationships and how she treated me as well. Anyways, cue me being abused from the age of 4 to 5 to about 17. Every day was hell. She was extremely strict, and her perspective was warped. She was also pretty big in stature and had a lot of strength. Examples of her being shitty. I've gotten beaten up badly once because her room was dirty. The dishes weren't washed, and I got beaten soon as I got home, even if there weren't dishes when I left to school. If I walked too loud, I'd get my ass beat. She broke my nose for looking at her the wrong way on my 10th birthday, when she brought me a cake I was allergic to. It had peanuts. She knows I'm slightly allergic, but feigned ignorance. It was more or less every day or every other day. She used her fists /elbows /extension cords /hangers /chairs /canes /bats /etc. whatever she could find I was getting beaten with. I couldn't ever escape to my room for long because she would always call me every few minutes to get her things or to yell at me. She never drank or did drugs or anything. Whenever she was upset and I happened to be in front of her, she'd kick me down the stairs to make me hurry up. She's put a knife to my neck before and had to be forcibly stopped by her puff of the time. Burned my Christmas presents from other people. She didn't get me anything that year, and just other really shitty things. The only thing I will say, she tried really hard to make up for it with video games and electronics and etc. It didn't make a difference to me though. It never helped. She controlled most aspects of my life. I got by with little petty revenges, peeing in the Lipton iced tea she drank, rubbing her forks and spoons between my butt cheeks before I served her dinner, ignoring her screams for help when she had kidney stones. How TF am I supposed to help anyways? But by the time I got to high school, I turned to alcohol. I resented her, and the negative atmosphere affected who I was as a person. I started to be cold and uncaring, calculated. She started kicking me out every few months, telling me to find somewhere else to live by age 15. She never drank or did drugs or anything. Whenever she was upset and I happened to be in front of her, she'd kick me down the stairs to make me hurry up. She's put a knife to my neck before and had to be forcibly stopped by her of the time. Burned my Christmas presents from other people. She didn't get me anything that year, and just other really shitty things. The only thing I will say, she tried really hard to make up for it with video games and electronics and etc. It didn't make a difference to me though. It never helped. She controlled most aspects of my life. I got by with little petty revenges, peeing in the Lipton iced tea she drank, rubbing her forks and spoons between my butt cheeks before I served her dinner, ignoring her screams for help when she had kidney stones. How tough am I supposed to help anyways? But by the time I got to high school, I turned to alcohol. I resented her and the negative atmosphere affected me away to a different country for a year and tried to keep my passport, but I made it back to the U.S. with the help of the embassy and my stepfather. She'd already left by that time and found some other dude. I came back senior year with no credits for the prior grade, which ended with me getting a GED. I spent most of the time I could with my best friend and started working shitty jobs. I was terrible at saving as I had accumulated loads of shitty habits while growing up, so it didn't make much difference. She eventually told me that if I went to college, I would always have a place to live until I finished. Cue my first 2 semesters at a 2-year college. I maintained a 3.7-ish GPA. My teachers loved me, and it was my escape. Towards the end of my 2nd semester during finals, I came home late one night around 10 p.m., and my mother yanks the door open screaming in my face asking when I'll move out. I'm slightly drunk and decide to completely ignore her and walk to my room. If I opened my mouth, that day would be the day I blew up and cursed her out. I've rarely ever raised my voice at her because it never ended well. Now at this point I'm 19, and I've been doing school full-time with no savings. Am also fairly fit and could easily take my mom at this point. Never laid a hand on her or any woman. I hate violence. I get to my room. She rips my door open and starts yelling. I say nothing and stare at her. She walks away and called the police on me, saying she thought I'd murder her and my younger siblings. I don't know where the fuck she got that idea from, as she's the one who's nearly killed me many times. I packed everything into a duffel bag and left 5 minutes afterwards. I failed all of my finals because I couldn't make it to my school. Things kinda spiraled, and the next 2 to 3 years were me on and off homeless. I survived the best I could in a big city with no college degree and made a lot of shitty choices due to my shitty habits. Eventually, I found a profitable hobby that gave me meaning, and through that I started to work my way up. Got my own apartment, had a full-time job, and did my hobby on the side. I hadn't kept up contact with my mother at all, but my younger sister, who was old enough to have a phone, found me on social media, so I saw photos and such. She didn't have it anywhere near as bad, but she did get beaten occasionally. My mother reached out via email, all smiles, asking how I've been. Now guys, I've always been envious of the relationship most people have with their moms, so I gave her a chance and gave her a call. We talked for a few minutes and everything was civil and seemed like things would go okay, but then she asked me what I've been up to the last few years, and I told her honestly that I was homeless for a while and struggled a lot after what she did to me, but I worked my way out of it. She literally laid. She laughed for a few seconds in a very condescending kind of chuckle and then said, "I never did a thing to you, so you don't know what abuse is. It's your own damn fault you were homeless. So how about yo?" But by that point I hung up. I was speechless and fuming. I don't know what abuse is. Okay, bitch. I've spent too few kicking long, letting you destroy my sanity. Now is the time. There was a few things my mother didn't know. 1. I knew for a fact that current well-paying job she had was gotten on lies, as she never got her college degree and lied about it on her resume. 2. I had access to all of her email accounts and cloud storage accounts since I was the one that set them up when I was younger, and she never changes her passwords. Lastly, she definitely wasn't aware that from 13 years old and on to the last time she hit me, I took photos of all my bruises, /marks, /wounds, /bloody noses, saving them to my computer, and then Google Drive. On top of that, my little sister had been sending me photos via social media of the bruises she got from my mom. The first thing I did was compile all of those photos/videos into one folder. I then reached out to CPS in my city and explained that my siblings were being abused, how I was abused in the past, and that I had mountains of proof. Since I've called the cops on my mother before, and the thing that happened with my older sister, there was immediately a home visit. They arrived almost a day later with the police, and coincidentally my mother was literally in the process of beating my younger sister when they were knocking. Cue an emergency removal of all my siblings from the house and my mother getting arrested, though she was released hours later. I was getting a day-to-day play-by-play because my mother's best friend is a blabbermouth, and everything my mother said she told her son, who relayed it to me without either of their knowledge. I sent CPS all the evidence, and there's a legit case against my mother now. The next day, I emailed and then called up her job to inform them that she had lied about having a very necessary college degree, as well current events in her life, which sparked a background check. She was fired days later, say 80 to 75, and a blacklist in the only industry you know how to work. I then spitefully deleted every cloud account and email address I ever made for her, which was all of them, which I'm sure will make keeping up with a lot bills, and it's nearly impossible. I then anonymously reported her to the IRS because of the tax fraud she committed for years by claiming people's children that weren't hers with a load of detailed information, since I lived with her while she did it. So now, my mother lost all her kids and her job. I'm meeting with a caseworker from CPS next week to talk more about what happens moving forward, but I do know they're not going back. How she's gonna pay her mortgage now and survive. I'm sure she's gonna get a call from the IRS who'll be looking for a few $1,000s she owes them. She also has to go back to court in a few months. Not exactly sure what she was charged with, but I'll update when I find out how everything turns out. Side note, she isn't aware I'm the cause of any of this. I plan on keeping tabs on her and waiting until it seems like she's close to death before I tell her it was all me and I peed in her Lipton. Shit, I wasn't expecting this much attention. I'll try to individually reply to everyone because I hate ignoring people, but it's gonna take a while, so here are just a few general things I felt I should add. I am psychologically not in the position to take care of my younger siblings or take on a parental role. I came very close to suicide 2 years ago, and I'm just trying to work on my alcohol problem and other habits that keep me in a cycle of instability. No, I haven't been to any programs or therapy. I don't think it will help me in regards to my nearly constant apathy and etc. My 2 youngest siblings weren't really bothered much. It was mostly my little sister after I left who got beatings, but luckily it wasn't anything near the level I had to deal with. I'm also incapable of taking custody because I don't have an apartment anymore due to bad decisions I made while drinking recently. So I'm back to homeless, but I crash with a friend once in a while. I am very well aware I am an influence on my younger siblings, and I'm trying to stay consistent with doing everything I can to be a better and more stable person for them, so that maybe I can finally build a real relationship with someone in my family. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone who keeps wishing me more success. Aside from my little siblings, I have zero contact with anyone else in my family. And even then, it's been very rare because I had to avoid my mother to see them and didn't want her knowing I kept in contact. Meeting my little sister after school, FaceTime, etc. The rest of my family were well aware of what she did and distanced themselves. I don't plan on reaching out to them, as I'm not good at maintaining relationships with mostly anyone anyways. My first gold ever. I appreciate you taking the time to read my story and gild me. I'm sorry for making this even longer than it already is. I'm sorry to anyone I made feel sad after reading this. That wasn't my intention. To all the people who had to deal with something similar, I'm really sorry that happened to you. I wish I could help, but I don't know how I can. To all the people who disagree with my actions, I'm sorry that I acted in a way you didn't like. I just wanted to share my story. Also for those concerned, my 3 siblings are currently being housed together, and I made it very clear I will do anything to make sure they aren't separated, but I know that anything can happen. I stay in constant contact, and they are all doing well. Lastly, I have read the hundreds of comments for me to look into therapy and AA, as well as people hinting that I may be depressed. I don't really know what my next step is in regards to that. I don't like to think about my feelings too much, but I do know I need to stop drinking. It doesn't help at all. I've been getting a very large amount of hateful and angry messages on Reddit and on my Instagram photography page from people who either think him a terrible person or think him over-exaggerating. It's not my job to convince you. I only came to tell you my story. Please stop. It doesn't help. For the wonderful people who've been offering me kind words and sharing their stories, I appreciate you. Am trying to reply to everyone who reached out, even if it takes a while. Am also in awe at how many people wanted to help in my situation. I worked with knew he was going to get fired, so he threw out his notebook that had 15 years of notes of how to do his job. Management really wanted that book so they could get rid of him, but keep his knowledge. They tried to unfire him until he could write it down again. He said no and left. A while ago, I worked at a baseball store called Walmart, or a general goods store that sounded like that. Not so long after the Great Recession of 2008, and management was trying to cut costs because of falling profit. One of the first things management did was fire 2 of the 3 full-time maintenance/cleaning guys. The one guy they kept, I'll call him MG for maintenance guy, was amazing at his job. Everything in the store ran well because of him and his willingness to go beyond what was required to help people. A genuinely nice guy. For 6 months, management tried to make having 1/3 of a maintenance staff work, and it failed miserably. MG could not do everything, and over time management increasingly asked him to coordinate some part-timers that were supposed to do the cleaning and carts. He spent so much time coordinating that he had no time for maintenance. The night crew was also cut, so they couldn't pick up the slack. Then 2 things happened within the space of a week that told management how important he was to the store running well. First, some cleaning machines broke down. Turns out they have to be properly cleaned weekly. If left alone, they gum up real bad, and parts wear out quickly. A several $1,000 repair bill because he was told to prioritize coordinating part-timers over tinkering with machines. A few days later, the deli lady nearly quit after the blade on the deli slicer went flying off and could have cut her face badly. Turns out that the bolt that held it in place was loose, and MG had tightened it weekly for her. When he didn't have time to do that anymore, he told management it had to be replaced for safety. Well, management didn't do that because it cost money, but they told people it was fixed. That could have been a lawsuit or criminal charges. They and deli lady got lucky. So management sat down with him and asked him why things were going wrong. MG told them point blank he needed enough time for maintenance, and someone else had to coordinate the part-time cleaners and check up on them. They were rather lazy. Management called BS. They said maintenance should be easy and done quickly. MG got mad because that insulted his professionalism, and he pulled out his notebook from his back pocket. It turns out that over his 15 years he had filled the book with charts, schedules, and diagrams of how to do his job and keep things running. There were over 100 things he checked weekly or monthly. There were a lot of machines he kept in running order. Some had certain things that were half broken and had to be wiggled in a certain way, etc. To be honest, a lot of these things were minor or major safety hazards, but over the years management was fine with not replacing multi-$1,000 machines if MG knew how to keep them working. As well, he did things that he should not have done, like calibrating machines for departments that should have done it themselves or contracted it out, etc. But he was a nice guy, and he liked helping people. He told me that he spent about a half hour telling management about what he did, and he suspected that until then nobody had ever known how much he did. Well, he may have said a few swear words and derogatory things while telling management why he needed time to do stuff. It was not a good moment for him, and he was pissed. At the end, he put his notebook back in his pocket and offered to take a week to write up everything he knew so that management would have written proof of why his job mattered in case a higher-up asked why they increased maintenance costs when corporate was demanding they cut costs. The multiple managers in the room looked at each other and asked him to leave so they could talk in private. He told me, several years later, when I ran into him somewhere and had lunch with him, that he had a premonition as he walked out of the room. So he went to the back room and tossed his notebook in the garbage compactor. For good measure, he then went around the store and emptied all the garbage cans and tossed those bags in so his notebook was properly buried. He was fine with it. All that information was in his head. After a few minutes later, management called him back. They told him that they could not allow him to keep working there because of the level of insubordination he had showed. They said as soon as he surrendered his badge, box cutter, and notebook, he would be escorted out of the building by security. They basically treated him like a criminal. Most fired people are not escorted out unless they were suspected of committing a crime that could not be proved. He handed over his badge and box cutter. They asked for the notebook. He said he threw it in the compactor. Their eyes went wide, and they asked why he threw it out. He said he thought he was going to write everything up nicely on the computer from memory, so he thought he was done with the notebook. At this point, management starts looking at each other worried because they had intended to take his book, fire him, and had a less subordinate part-timer who doesn't get expensive benefits like a full-timer do his job. Now they couldn't. One of the managers suggested that he be allowed to write up the info before being escorted out. The others agreed. He was given the chance to be unfired just long enough to give them the info. How kind. He laughed and walked out, head held high, and management followed him to his car to make sure he left. I don't have exact numbers, but I guesstimate the store had to spend at least $20,000 or $30,000 to replace stuff that MG had kept working beyond the equipment's lifespan, and the new guy they hired had a hell of a time figuring out how things worked. To be honest, in a few cases MG had gone too far, like creating fire hazards by taping broken chargers together after rewiring them instead of tossing them, but management had never complained when he saved them money. There was also a lot of things that should have been done by the health and safety team or the departments, but they also never complained about having less work. I asked him if throwing out that notebook was illegal, but he said it was personal property to help him remember things. It was not a work-provided notebook. He was proud of what he did. His pride clearly showed in how he told the story. He said that nobody is allowed to question his professional judgment by implying he is lazy. I agree. Edit. After reading the comments, I'll say a few things to clarify some things. It might be too late for that, but I don't check Reddit while I sleep. I came in the day after the deli machine incident. I was hearing things, and I asked someone what happened. I was told that the machine malfunctioned while deli lady was using it, and she freaked out and refused to come in. She took a few days off to calm her nerves. Over the course of the next few days, I heard multiple versions of the story, some involving the blade coming off, some not, and one that involved the blade getting lodged in the ceiling. Did I pick an interesting version of it to retell? Yes. The problem with telling someone else's story is it keeps getting better every time it is told. So if you see people commenting that deli machines don't work that way, they are probably right. I mentioned that this happened during / soon after the Great Recession, which is important. According to people there, management used to readily approve replacing damaged equipment. It was after the recession they stopped doing that and relied on MG's temporary fixes. A lot of what he did was not supposed to last. He was really pissed at the end because multiple times management had refused to replace stuff that was obviously broken. And at times management had told them they would replace something and then changed their minds without telling him. That is why he really snapped at the end. Some people have pointed out that replacing $20,000 of machinery is cheaper than paying a guy for 15 years. That is technically true, but stuff does not stop breaking down or stop needing to be cleaned just because someone was fired. The store had to replace him anyhow, so firing him did not save money. As well, that $20,000 or so of replacement should have happened over 4 or 5 fiscal years, not all at once. Chances are some manager kept getting good annual reviews for keeping capital spending down, not realizing that he was just postponing the inevitable. Final edit. I don't know what exactly was in the book, but I can speculate. Yes, it was probably a lot of scribbles that could not be easily deciphered. Yes, in the long run he was easily replaceable, and the incident is a blip on profit. The one major thing management probably really wanted was the list of what machines needed to be watched/tinkered. The couple weeks or so after he left were a shit show, because people were afraid to use stuff because of crazy stories circulating about Deli Lady. See above. But within 2 months things were humming along fine. However, this is not a subreddit about proper management or profitability. It's about revenge, and he got his revenge.